Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a literal titan of medieval thought, Thomas Aquinas' Architecture of Penance from the Summa Theologica. We're going to dismantle his massive, complex theological framework into manageable pieces using his very own scholastic method. It's incredibly fascinating to look at how the medieval mind categorized human behavior, justice, and the literal mechanics of the soul.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start by defining the act of penance, then explore a powerful metaphor called a plank after shipwreck, move on to the pardon of mortal sin, and finally, look at dealing with venial sins. Let's get right to it.
Section 1. Defining the act of penance. Aquinas, he approaches this like an impartial, utterly fascinated scholar mapping out the gears of the soul. He loves to kick things off with a provocative question to get that rigorous intellectual dialectic going. Like, can an all-powerful God just wave a hand and forgive a sin without the sinner actually doing anything? He spins this around, looking at every possible angle, before delivering his incredibly precise synthesis.
And he counters these objections using some heavy hitters, like this brilliant quote from St. Augustine. Augustine emphasizes that human cooperation is, well, absolutely required for a cure. It's like God might grant the grace, sure, but because sin involves your will turning away, your will has to actively turn back. It's a really profound statement on agency, right? You literally cannot be healed against your will or without your active participation.
So here's where it gets interesting. Aquinas actually splits penance into a dual nature, an external sacrament and an internal virtue. Think of it like bodily medicine. Sometimes, you just apply a bandage, an external plaster, but other times, the cure actually requires the active, sweating effort of the patient, like physical therapy. Penance demands the whole shebang, the external, tangible actions of both the penitent and the priest, alongside the internal virtue of justice. It's a conscious choice made by right reason to amend the offense.
And this setup beautifully illustrates the Aristotelian blueprint Aquinas uses to build this sacrament logically from the ground up using matter and form. In penance, the proximate matter is the penitent's actual grief and confession. The remote matter is the sins themselves, brought forward not for approval, obviously, but for absolute destruction. And finally, the form that completes this whole spiritual machine is the priest declaring, "I absolve thee." It's a highly precise, almost legalistic mechanical operation.
Section 2. A plank after shipwreck.
Having laid out those structural mechanics, Aquinas leans into this deeply resonant, almost cinematic image of human frailty. He heavily champions the specific analogy from the early church father Jerome. Penance isn't the foundation of the spiritual house. It's a desperate reaction to a disaster. It is literally a second plank after shipwreck.
To break that down, Aquinas says the first help for anyone crossing the chaotic sea of life is to stay inside a whole, intact ship, and he equates that intact ship to the spiritual integrity you get from baptism. But let's face it, human beings are incredibly prone to actual sin. When you ruin that integrity and the ship goes down, your second help, the emergency lifeline you have to grab, is the plank of penance. If baptism is the intact ship, penance is the emergency trauma care you absolutely must rely on when you're drowning in the water.
Moving on to Section 3, the pardon of mortal sin.
Now we're going to examine the medical and legal mechanics of curing the absolute most severe spiritual diseases. Aquinas poses this fascinating puzzle. Can a person achieve a partial, piecemeal, legal settlement with God? Like, can you truly repent for stealing while you're actively holding a bitter grudge against your neighbor? It's kind of like trying to cure a heart attack while actively chain-smoking. Doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
So he answers that with a resounding no, leaning again on Augustine. You absolutely cannot maintain an affection for one mortal sin while effectively repenting of another. Why? Well, because every mortal sin completely turns you away from God. You can't be simultaneously turned toward the good to receive forgiveness while your back is still turned because you're holding on to another vice. It defies the very physics of how the human will operates. The gears simply don't turn that way. But, and here's the catch, even when complete forgiveness is granted, you're not totally off the hook. The eternal punishment is forgiven immediately. The spiritual death sentence is commuted, but a temporal debt remains. Think of it like a massive legal settlement. The judge might forgive the jail time, sure, but you still have to pay the financial restitution to restore the balance of justice. You were too indulgent to your own will, so to balance the cosmic scales, you have to suffer something against your will.
Furthermore, even after the cure, there's a gradual recovery process. You see, repeating bad actions creates a habit, a deeply ingrained disposition in the soul. When you're forgiven, the core guilt is wiped out, but those dispositions remain as remnants of sin. Aquinas actually compares it to the story in the Gospel of Mark where Jesus healed a blind man in stages. First, the man saw people looking like walking trees, and only after that was his sight perfectly restored. Healing from severe sin leaves weakened remnants that just take time to clear. But what happens when the sins aren't quite so catastrophic?
Which brings us to Section 4, dealing with venial sins.
Let's explore the lower stakes infractions in Aquinas' architecture. Notice the really precise contrast he draws here. Mortal sin severs the connection entirely. It literally destroys the foundation. But venial sin? That acts a lot more like dust, temporarily clogging up the machinery. Aquinas describes it as an inordinate turning to a created good that makes your affections sluggish, sure, but it doesn't completely break the engine of your spiritual life.
And because venial sins don't sever that core connection, they're actually much easier to clear away. In fact, Aquinas lists everyday actions that serve as almost medieval spiritual life hacks for remission. We're talking about simply being sprinkled with holy water, beating your breast to acknowledge a fault, or even just reciting the "Forgive us our trespasses" line in the Lord's Prayer. These work because they imply a genuine movement of reverence for God that naturally counters the minor fault.
So the takeaway here is that you don't always need the full, formal legal trial of the sacrament. Sometimes a simple, implicit act of reverence clears those minor debts right up. You don't need a massive infusion of new grace to cure a venial sin. You just need a movement of the grace you already have to wipe away that dust clogging the machinery. It's honestly an incredibly practical, nuanced view of daily human stumbling.
We'll end this explainer on a profound thought that perfectly encapsulates the medieval concept of grace. Because despite all this incredibly strict architecture, the complex rules of matter and form, and the rigid scales of justice, Aquinas insists that God's mercy is infinitely larger than any human failing. He notes that a physician who couldn't heal a recurring disease would be a pretty poor doctor indeed. And that leaves us with a compelling final thought. How might this highly structured, yet ultimately boundless framing of justice and mercy completely change the way we view modern forgiveness, both for ourselves and for the people we struggle to forgive?